The dust rose in swirling clouds behind Eleanor Anderson's boots as she marched toward the abandoned warehouse at the edge of Camp Verde, Arizona territory, clutching her carefully drawn plans against her chest, while the sound of mocking laughter still rang in her ears from the town meeting she had just fled. It was the summer of 1882, and she had just turned 23 years old, old enough to know that dreams without action remained mere fantasies, but young enough to believe that perhaps, just perhaps, she could turn her vision into something real. The men in that meeting hall had looked at her as though she had sprouted horns when she proposed building a school for girls. Not just any school, but one that would teach practical skills alongside reading and arithmetic, where young women could learn bookkeeping, animal husbandry, and trades that would allow them to support themselves. The warehouse loomed before her, its weathered wood bleached gray by years of harsh desert sun. Eleanor pushed open the heavy door, wincing at the screech of rusted hinges. Inside, the space was larger than she remembered, filled with broken crates and the musty smell of disuse. Shafts of light streamed through gaps in the walls, illuminating dancing dust motes. She spread her plans on a relatively clean section of floor, studying the careful measurements and notes she had made over months of planning. "They will see," she whispered to herself. "When it is built, when girls are learning and thriving, they will understand." But even as she spoke the words, doubt crept in like the desert heat. The town council had not just dismissed her proposal. They had laughed. Mayor Hutchins had actually slapped his knee, his face red with mirth, as though she had told the funniest joke he had heard all year. The banker, Mr. Wilkes, had suggested she focus on finding a husband instead of filling her pretty head with impossible notions. Even some of the women present had looked at her with pity, as though she were a child playing pretend. Eleanor heard footsteps outside and quickly gathered her papers. She was not ready to face more mockery, not yet. But the door opened before she could hide, and a tall figure blocked the sunlight streaming through the entrance. "Sorry, I did not mean to intrude," a man's voice said, deep and careful. "Saw the door open. This building has been empty for months, and I thought maybe someone was causing trouble." Eleanor straightened her spine, preparing for another confrontation. "I am not causing trouble. I own this building." The man stepped inside, and she could see him properly now. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-bronzed skin and dark hair that curled slightly at the collar of his worn shirt. His eyes were a striking gray-green, and he held his hat respectfully in his hands. A gun belt hung at his hip, marking him as either a cowboy or a drifter, maybe both. "My apologies, madam," he said, and his voice held genuine respect. "I am Miles Quentin. I work at the Triple Bar Ranch about 5 miles west. We come into town for supplies most weeks." "Eleanor Anderson," she replied, relaxing slightly. "And yes, I bought this building 3 months ago. I have been saving for years." Miles looked around the dilapidated space, his expression thoughtful rather than judgmental. "What are you planning to do with it?" The question hung in the air, and Eleanor found herself hesitating. She had just been humiliated for sharing her dreams. Why would this cowboy be any different? But something in his steady gaze made her want to answer honestly. "I want to build a school," she said, lifting her chin defiantly. "A school for girls where they can learn skills that will help them survive and thrive, not just needlework and poetry." She waited for the laugh, for the dismissive wave of his hand. Instead, Miles stepped closer, genuinely interested. "What kind of skills?" Eleanor blinked, thrown off balance by his question. "Bookkeeping, basic veterinary care, how to manage a household budget, perhaps even some carpentry and practical mathematics. Things that would allow them to work, to support themselves if they need to." That sounds incredibly useful, Miles said, and there was no mockery in his tone. My sister could have used something like that. She married young because she thought she had no other options. Her husband treats her poorly, but she stays because she has no way to support herself and her children. The earnestness in his voice touched something deep in Eleanor's chest. That is exactly why this is important, she said, her words tumbling out faster now. Women should have choices. They should have the skills to stand on their own feet to make decisions about their own lives. Miles nodded slowly, then gestured to the papers in her hands. Are those your plans? Eleanor hesitated only a moment before spreading them out again. Miles crouched down beside her, studying the drawings with careful attention. She explained each section. Classrooms here, a small library there, a workshop area where girls could practice hands-on skills, living quarters for students who came from surrounding ranches and farms. This is remarkable, Miles said when she finished. You have thought of everything. The town council did not think so, Eleanor said bitterly. They laughed at me, told me to go find a husband and stop wasting everyone's time with foolish dreams. Miles looked up at her, and anger flashed in his eyes, though she sensed it was not directed at her. They said that. Among other things. Eleanor gathered her papers again, suddenly embarrassed by her outburst. But it does not matter. I will find a way. I have the building. I just need to repair it, hire teachers, purchase supplies, convince parents to send their daughters. Simple. The sarcasm in her last word made Miles smile slightly. Not simple at all, he agreed, but possible. Eleanor studied him, trying to gauge if he was humoring her. You really think so? I do. Miles stood, dusting off his knees. And I will help you build it, every part of it. The words hung in the dusty air between them, so unexpected that Eleanor was certain she had misheard. What? I will help you, Miles repeated, meeting her eyes directly. I am good with my hands. I have helped build barns, repair houses, construct fences. I know others who might help too if asked properly, and I think what you want to do is important. Eleanor felt tears prick her eyes, and she blinked them back furiously. She had not cried during the town meeting, and she would not cry now. Why would you help me? You do not even know me. I know you have a dream worth building, Miles said simply. And I know what it feels like to watch people you care about suffer because they have no choices. If this school can change that for even a handful of girls, it is worth the effort. Eleanor stared at him, searching for the catch, the hidden agenda, the inevitable moment when he would reveal this was all a joke. But his expression remained open and honest. Finally, she nodded. All right, when can you start? How about now? Miles said. We can assess what repairs are needed most urgently. Do you have tools? Some, Eleanor admitted. I bought a few basic things, but I am not entirely sure what all I will need. Let me take a look around, Miles said. He began walking the perimeter of the building, testing boards, examining the roof supports, checking the foundation. Eleanor followed, trying to see the space through his more experienced eyes. The next hour passed in a blur of practical discussion. Miles pointed out structural issues she had not noticed, explained what could be salvaged and what would need replacing, estimated costs and time frames. His knowledge was extensive, and he explained things in a way that made sense without being condescending. The good news is the bones of this building are solid, Miles said finally. It will take work, but it is absolutely salvageable. The roof needs the most attention. Several sections are rotted through. We should start there, keep the weather out while we work on everything else. That sounds logical, Eleanor agreed. How much do you think materials will cost? Miles pulled a small notebook from his pocket and began jotting down figures. The total made Eleanor wince, but it was not impossible. She had been saving for years, working as a seamstress and taking in laundry. Her savings would cover materials, but only if she was careful. "I can manage that," she said. "But I cannot pay you for your labor, at least not much. I need to save funds for supplies and teacher salaries once the school opens." "I am not asking for payment," Miles said. "I work at the ranch during the day. I can help here in the evenings and on Sundays." "That is your only time to rest," Eleanor protested. "I cannot ask you to give that up." "You did not ask, I offered." Miles smiled, and it transformed his serious face into something warmer. "Besides, I think this is a better way to spend my time than sitting in the saloon." Eleanor found herself smiling back. "Then I accept your offer." "Thank you, Miles, truly." They shook hands, and Eleanor felt calluses rough against her palm. These were hands accustomed to hard work, hands that could turn her dreams into reality. When Miles left a short time later, promising to return the next evening with proper tools, Eleanor remained in the warehouse, looking at the space with new eyes. Perhaps it was possible after all. The next evening, Eleanor arrived at the warehouse to find Miles already there, along with two other men. She recognized them from around town but had never spoken to either. "Miss Anderson, these are friends of mine from the ranch," Miles said. "This is Joseph and Henry. They wanted to help too." The men nodded respectfully. Joseph was older, maybe 40, with graying hair and kind eyes. Henry looked younger, closer to Miles's age, with a ready smile. "Miles told us about your school," Joseph said. "My daughter is 16. I would like her to have opportunities beyond marriage. I will help however I can." "As will I," Henry added. "My mother raised 5 children alone after my father died. She struggled because she had no training for work. This school could help other women avoid that hardship." Eleanor felt overwhelmed by their generosity. "I do not know what to say." "Thank you, all of you." "Less talking, more working," Miles said with a grin. "Daylight is burning." They set to work, and Eleanor quickly learned that while she might own the building, these men knew how to bring it back to life. They taught her as they worked, showing her how to identify rotted wood, how to properly secure new boards, how to read the building's structure and understand its needs. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, they had made visible progress. One section of the roof was completely repaired, and they had cleared out most of the debris from inside. "We will need to order more lumber," Miles said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "What we brought tonight covered the worst of the roof, but there is more to do." "I will go to the lumber yard tomorrow," Eleanor said. "I should be able to place an order and arrange delivery." The men exchanged glances. "You might face some resistance," Joseph said carefully. "Word around town is that the council made their opinion of your school pretty clear." "Let them resist," Eleanor said firmly. "This is happening whether they approve or not." Miles grinned at her determined tone. "That is the spirit, but perhaps I should go with you just in case." Eleanor wanted to argue that she could handle it herself, but practicality won out. If Miles's presence made the lumber yard owner more likely to take her order seriously, she would swallow her pride. That would be appreciated. The next afternoon, Eleanor met Miles outside the lumber yard. True to Joseph's prediction, the owner, Mr. Simmons, was less than enthusiastic about her project. "I heard about your little scheme," he said, crossing his arms over his barrel chest. "Do not see why I should waste good lumber on a foolish venture that will never get off the ground." "It is already getting off the ground," Eleanor replied evenly. "The building is being repaired as we speak. I need lumber and I have money to pay for it. This is a business transaction, nothing more." "That's so." Mr. Simmons looked skeptical. "And who is going to do all this building?" "You going to hammer nails yourself, if necessary?" "Yes," Eleanor said. "But I have help." "She has me," Miles said, speaking for the first time. And Joseph Miller and Henry Ross. We are handling the construction. Mr. Simmons's expression shifted slightly. All three men were known as reliable workers. That right. You boys are really putting time into this. We are, Miles confirmed. So if you could fill Miss Anderson's order, we will be by to pick up the lumber within the week. The transaction was completed, though Mr. Simmons made his disapproval clear through his scowls and muttered comments. As they left, Eleanor released a breath she had not realized she was holding. "Thank you," she said to Miles. "I suspect he would have refused if I had been alone." "Probably," Miles agreed. "But you held your ground. You did not back down or apologize for your dreams. That matters." They began walking back toward the main street. The afternoon sun beat down and the town bustled with activity. Eleanor was acutely aware of the looks they received. A young woman walking with a cowboy, deep in conversation, would fuel gossip. "Does it bother you?" Miles asked, noticing her awareness of the stares. "The talk, I mean." "I stopped caring what most of this town thinks when they laughed at me," Eleanor said. "But I do not want to damage your reputation." Miles laughed outright at that. "My reputation? I am a ranch hand who lives in a bunkhouse. I do not have a reputation to damage." "Still," Eleanor said, "you are being kind, helping me. I do not want that to cause you trouble." "Let me worry about my own troubles," Miles said gently. "You have enough of your own." They reached the boarding house where Eleanor rented a room. She paused at the steps, turning to face him. Tomorrow evening," Miles confirmed. "We should have the rest of the roof finished by the end of the week." As Eleanor watched him walk away, she realized she was smiling. For the first time since conceiving her plan, she felt like it might actually happen. And more than that, she found herself looking forward to the evenings, to the work, to the conversations that flowed between hammering and sawing. Over the following weeks, a pattern emerged. Miles, Joseph, and Henry arrived each evening, sometimes bringing others who wanted to help. Word of the project spread, and opinions remained divided. Some in town thought Eleanor was foolish and the men helping her were wasting their time. But others, particularly women and those with daughters, began to express quiet support. One evening, Eleanor arrived to find a basket of food waiting by the door, still warm and covered with a clean cloth. There was no note, but inside were fresh bread, cheese, and apple pie. The next week, another basket appeared. Then fabric showed up, good quality material that could be used for curtains or cushions. Anonymous gifts from anonymous supporters. The building slowly transformed. The roof was repaired, the walls reinforced, broken windows replaced. Miles proved to be not just skilled but creative, finding ways to maximize the space and incorporate Eleanor's ideas while suggesting improvements she had not considered. "What if we built a loft here?" he suggested one evening, pointing to the high ceiling in what would become the main classroom. "Storage space, or possibly additional sleeping quarters if you have more students than expected." "That is brilliant," Eleanor said, studying the space with new eyes. "Yes, we should definitely do that." As they worked side by side, Eleanor learned about Miles's life. He had grown up on a small ranch in New Mexico territory, the second of 4 children. His father had died when Miles was 15, and he had helped his mother keep the ranch going for several years before drought forced them to sell. His mother and younger siblings now lived with his sister, the one trapped in an unhappy marriage. Miles sent them money when he could. "That is why you are helping me," Eleanor said one evening as they painted the interior walls a soft cream color. "You see your mother and sister in this project." "Partly," Miles admitted, "but it is also because I see you." Eleanor paused, her brush dripping paint. "What do you mean?" Miles set down his own brush and turned to face her fully. "You have a dream that matters. You are brave enough to pursue it despite opposition. You work harder than anyone I know. Those are qualities worth supporting, worth admiring. The intensity in his gaze made Eleanor's breath catch. She had been so focused on the school, so driven by her mission, that she had not allowed herself to acknowledge the growing feeling she had developed for Miles. But in that moment, with paint on her hands and dust in her hair, she could not deny it any longer. "Miles," she began, but he shook his head. "You do not have to say anything," he said quickly. "I know you have a goal, a dream you are building. I am not trying to complicate that. I just want you to know that I see you, all of you, and I think you are remarkable." Eleanor's heart pounded in her chest. She thought of all the men who had dismissed her, who had laughed at her dreams, who had suggested she abandon her goals for marriage. Miles was different. He saw her dreams as part of who she was, not obstacles to overcome. "You are remarkable too," she said softly. "You have given so much of your time, your energy, your skills. You believed in this when no one else did." "That is not quite true," Miles said. "You believed in it first. I just had the good sense to believe in you." The moment stretched between them, heavy with unspoken feelings. Then Henry called from outside, breaking the spell. They returned to painting, but something had shifted. Eleanor was no longer just building a school. She was building something else too, something she had not planned but was beginning to want just as much. The weeks turned into months. Summer faded into autumn, and the building continued its transformation. Walls were finished, floors repaired and polished. Eleanor ordered desks from a catalog, spending a significant portion of her savings, but knowing they were necessary. She also began reaching out to potential teachers, writing careful letters explaining her vision and the opportunity she was offering. Miles was there through it all, his steady presence becoming as necessary to her as air. They talked about everything during those long evening hours. Philosophy and politics, hopes and fears, silly stories from childhood and serious discussions about the future. Eleanor learned that Miles wanted his own ranch someday, a place where he could work for himself instead of someone else. She shared her secret fear that even if the school succeeded, people would always see her as the foolish woman who had ideas above her station. "Let them think what they want," Miles said. "You will know the truth. The girls you teach will know it. That is what matters." One October evening, as they were installing shelves in what would become the library, Miles suddenly spoke. "Eleanor, I need to tell you something." His serious tone made her set down her tools. "What is it?" "I am in love with you," he said plainly. "I have been for a while now. I know your focus is on the school and I respect that, but I could not let more time pass without being honest." Eleanor felt her heart swell. She had known on some level, but hearing the words aloud made them real. "Miles, I love you too." His face lit up with pure joy. "You do? How could I not?" Eleanor said, stepping closer to him. "You have been beside me through everything. You believed in my dreams and helped me build them. You see me as I am and do not ask me to be less. You are the best man I have ever known." Miles closed the distance between them, cupping her face gently in his calloused hands. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," Eleanor whispered. The kiss was soft and sweet, full of promise. When they pulled apart, both were smiling. "What happens now?" Eleanor asked. "We still have so much work to do on the school." "We keep building," Miles said simply. "Together, we build your school and our life. They do not have to be separate things." "I like that idea," Eleanor said. She leaned her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "But Miles, I cannot abandon the school once it opens. This will always be part of my life." "I know," Miles said, wrapping his arms around her. "And I would never ask you to give it up. Your dreams make you who you are." "I fell in love with a woman who wants to change the world. I am not fool enough to want to change that." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the half-finished room, surrounded by the physical manifestation of Eleanor's dreams and their growing love. As autumn deepened, the school neared completion. Eleanor received a response to one of her letters from a woman named Margaret, a teacher from Kansas who was intrigued by the curriculum Eleanor proposed. Margaret was a widow in her 40s with teaching experience and a progressive philosophy about women's education. They exchanged several letters, and Margaret eventually agreed to come to Camp Verde and serve as the head teacher. The town's attitude began to shift as the building's transformation became undeniable. What had been a derelict warehouse now looked like a proper school. Windows gleamed, paint was fresh, and a sign hung over the door, "Anderson School for Girls." Mayor Hutchins stopped Eleanor on the street one afternoon. "Miss Anderson, I see your project has progressed significantly." "It has," Eleanor said, keeping her voice neutral. This was the man who had laughed loudest at the town meeting. "I suppose I should apologize," he said, though he did not sound entirely sincere. "I did not think you would get this far." "You thought I would give up," Eleanor corrected. "Many people did, but I am not in the habit of abandoning my dreams just because they are difficult." The mayor cleared his throat, looking uncomfortable. "Yes, well, when do you plan to open?" "After the first of the year," Eleanor said. "I have a teacher arriving next month. We will spend November and December preparing curriculum and reaching out to potential students." "I see. And how many students are you expecting?" "I have commitments from 8 families so far," Eleanor said. "Some will board here during the week, others will come daily from town. I am hoping for at least a dozen total to start." The mayor nodded slowly. "That is more than I expected. Perhaps there is a need for this after all." It was not quite an endorsement, but it was not mockery either. Eleanor took it as progress. Margaret arrived in early November, a tall woman with graying hair and intelligent eyes. She and Eleanor clicked immediately, sharing similar philosophies about education and women's potential. Miles helped convert one of the upstairs rooms into comfortable quarters for her. "You have done remarkable work here," Margaret told Eleanor as they toured the building. "The space is perfect. And Miles tells me you designed most of it yourself." "With input from Miles and the others who helped," Eleanor said. "I knew what I wanted the school to do. They knew how to make the building support that vision." "A good partnership," Margaret observed, and something in her tone suggested she was talking about more than construction. Eleanor and Miles had not made their relationship public yet, but those who spent time around them could sense the connection. They worked together with an easy familiarity, anticipating each other's needs and thoughts. When they looked at each other, even casually, their feelings were apparent. One evening, as they finished setting up the last of the classroom desks, Miles asked, "Have you thought about what comes after the school opens?" "What do you mean?" Eleanor was labeling drawers in a supply cabinet. "I mean for us," Miles said. "Eleanor, I want to marry you. I want to build a life with you, but I need to know what that looks like to you." Eleanor set down her labels and turned to face him. This was a conversation she had been both anticipating and dreading. "Miles, I love you, and I want to marry you, but I will not give up this school." "I know that," Miles said patiently. "I am not asking you to. I am asking what our life looks like if we are married. Do we live here at the school? Do we find a house in town? Do I keep working at the ranch? These are practical questions we need to answer." Eleanor felt relief flood through her. He was not asking her to choose. He was asking her to plan. "I think I need to live here at least for the first year or two. The school needs constant attention and students may need me at odd hours. Margaret will be here, but it is my responsibility." "Then I live here too," Miles said simply. "We can convert one of the larger rooms into proper living quarters for both of us. Unless you think that would be inappropriate, we would be married, Eleanor pointed out. And it is my building. I do not particularly care what anyone thinks is inappropriate. Miles smiled. Good. As for work, I have been thinking. You will need someone to maintain the building, handle repairs, manage the grounds. What if that person was me? You could pay me a small salary, nothing extravagant. I could also continue doing some ranch work when you do not need me. It would be enough to contribute to our household. Eleanor considered this. You would give up your position at the Triple Bar. I would trade it for a position here, Miles corrected. I would still be doing similar work, just in service of something I believe in, and I would be with you. Are you certain? Eleanor needed him to be sure. This is my dream, Miles. I do not want you to resent it or me down the line. Miles crossed the room and took her hands. Eleanor, your dream has become my dream. This school, what it represents, what it can do for girls who need options and opportunities. I believe in it as much as you do, and I believe in us. I want to build both with you. Then yes, Eleanor said, tears of joy streaming down her face. Yes, I will marry you. Yes to all of it. Miles kissed her then, deep and passionate, pouring all his love and commitment into that kiss. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathless. When? Miles asked. When should we marry? Soon, Eleanor said. Before the school opens in January. I want to start this new chapter as your wife. They settled on a date in mid-December, giving them time to make arrangements, but not so long that they had to wait endlessly. It would be a simple ceremony, just close friends and family. Miles's mother and siblings would come from New Mexico. Eleanor had no family nearby, but Margaret offered to stand with her, and several of the women who had quietly supported the school expressed their wish to attend. The weeks leading up to the wedding were a flurry of activity. Final preparations for the school opening, wedding planning, and spreading the word to potential students all competed for Eleanor's attention. But through it all, Miles was there, steady and supportive. One afternoon, Eleanor was going over the curriculum with Margaret when a knock at the door interrupted them. A woman stood there, thin and worn-looking, with a girl of about 14 beside her. Are you Miss Anderson? The woman asked hesitantly. I am, Eleanor confirmed. Please come in. The woman and girl entered, looking around with wide eyes. My name is Mrs. Patterson. This is my daughter, Lucy. We heard about your school. Would you like a tour? Eleanor offered. Mrs. Patterson nodded gratefully. As they walked through the building, Eleanor explained the curriculum and philosophy. Lucy's eyes grew brighter with each room they visited. We live about 15 miles west, Mrs. Patterson said when the tour ended. My husband died last spring. I am trying to keep our small farm going, but I cannot do it alone. Lucy helps, but there is only so much we can manage. I need her to have skills that could help her find work if we lose the farm. Lucy would be very welcome here, Eleanor said. We offer boarding for girls whose families live too far for daily travel. Room and board are included in the tuition. Mrs. Patterson's face fell. How much is the tuition? Eleanor named the figure, which she had calculated carefully to cover costs without being prohibitively expensive. Still, she saw Mrs. Patterson's expression and knew it was beyond the woman's means. However, Eleanor added quickly, we do have a work-study program. Lucy could help with cleaning, cooking, building maintenance, and receive reduced tuition in exchange. We also offer scholarships for students with financial need. Really? Hope flickered across Mrs. Patterson's face. You would do that? Education should not be only for the wealthy, Eleanor said firmly. If Lucy wants to learn and is willing to work hard, we will find a way to make it possible. Mrs. Patterson began to cry, and Lucy hugged her mother tightly. Thank you, the woman whispered. You do not know what this means. After they left, Margaret smiled at Eleanor. That was beautifully handled. You just changed that girl's life." "That is the point of all this," Eleanor said, feeling the truth of it deep in her bones. This is why it mattered to keep going even when they laughed. The wedding took place on a crisp December morning. Snow had fallen the night before, coating Camp Verde in white and making everything look clean and new. The ceremony was held at the school, in the main classroom that Eleanor and Miles had built together. Eleanor wore a simple but elegant dress of deep blue silk, one she had sewn herself. Miles wore a new suit, his dark hair neatly combed. They stood before the minister with their closest friends gathered around. Miles's mother, a small woman with her son's gray-green eyes, hugged Eleanor tightly before the ceremony. "Thank you for loving my son," she whispered. "And thank you for what you are building here. It gives me hope for my daughter, for all daughters." When the minister asked Eleanor if she took Miles to be her husband, she answered clearly and firmly, "I do." When Miles made the same promise to her, his voice rang with conviction. "I do." They sealed their vows with a kiss, and the small gathering erupted in applause. Joseph and Henry clapped loudest, both grinning widely. Margaret wiped away tears. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting past the windows. The celebration that followed was modest but joyful. Women from town who had quietly supported Eleanor brought food. Someone produced a fiddle, and there was dancing in the classroom. Miles waltzed Eleanor around the space they had built together, both laughing. "How does it feel to be Mrs. Quentin?" Miles asked as they spun. "It feels right," Eleanor said. "Like everything is finally falling into place." That night, alone in their newly renovated quarters, Miles and Eleanor began their married life. They made love with tenderness and passion, learning each other's bodies, expressing physically what words could not fully capture. Afterwards, lying in Miles's arms, Eleanor felt complete in a way she never had before. "I love you," she whispered into the darkness. "I love you too," Miles replied, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "My brilliant, determined, remarkable wife." The Anderson School for Girls opened its doors in early January 1883. On that first day, 12 students arrived, ranging in age from 13 to 17. Lucy Patterson was there, along with Joseph's daughter, Mary. Others came from farms and ranches around the area, daughters of families who wanted more for their girls than early marriage. Eleanor stood at the front of the classroom, looking at the young faces before her, and felt tears of joy. This was what she had dreamed of, these girls eager to learn, ready to build their own futures. "Welcome," she said, her voice strong and clear. "You are here because you want more from life. You are here because you believe in your own potential. Over the coming months, we will work together to build the skills and knowledge you need to create the lives you deserve. This will not be easy. You will be challenged, but I promise you it will be worth it." Margaret taught most of the academic classes, while Eleanor focused on practical skills and business education. Miles handled building maintenance and also taught basic carpentry and animal husbandry. Together, they created an environment where girls felt safe to ask questions, to make mistakes, to reach beyond what society expected of them. Word of the school spread. By spring, they had 18 students. By the following fall, they needed to expand, converting the loft Miles had suggested into additional classroom space. The town that had once mocked Eleanor now took pride in the school. Visitors came from other parts of Arizona territory to see what they had built. Lucy Patterson thrived. She had a natural aptitude for mathematics and bookkeeping. By her second year, she was helping Eleanor manage the school's finances. When she graduated at 17, she took a position as an accountant for a business in Phoenix, one of the first women in the territory to hold such a position. Joseph's daughter, Mary, discovered a talent for veterinary work. She spent extra time with Miles, learning everything he could teach her about animal care. Eventually, she became known throughout the region for her skill with difficult births and sick animals, running a successful practice from her father's ranch. Every graduate represented a success, a girl given choices she would not have had otherwise. Some went on to further education. Some opened their own businesses. Some did marry, but they did so from a position of knowledge and choice, with skills to fall back on if needed. Eleanor and Miles built their life around the school, but not exclusively. They took time for themselves, riding out into the desert on Sunday afternoons, talking and dreaming and enjoying each other's company. Their love deepened with time, growing roots like the plants that managed to thrive in Arizona's harsh soil. 2 years after the school opened, Eleanor discovered she was pregnant. The news filled her with joy but also concern. How would she manage the school with a child, the same way you manage everything? Miles said when she shared her fears. With intelligence, determination, and help from people who care about you, Margaret can take on more administrative duties. We can hire an additional teacher, and I will be here every step of the way. Their son was born in the spring of 1885. They named him Thomas, after Miles's father. Thomas was a healthy baby with his mother's dark eyes and his father's smile. Eleanor took a few weeks to recover and bond with her son, but then she was back at the school, often with Thomas in a sling against her chest. The students adored him. They took turns helping care for him, learning practical childcare skills in the process. Thomas's first steps were taken in a classroom, surrounded by cheering teenage girls. He learned to speak surrounded by the sounds of education and growth. When Thomas was 2, Eleanor became pregnant again. Their daughter, Sarah, was born in 1888. She was quieter than her brother, thoughtful and observant, traits she clearly inherited from her father. With 2 children, Eleanor and Miles's life became fuller, busier, but no less purposeful. The school continued to thrive. They added more programs, including advanced mathematics and science. Margaret, now in her 50s, remained a dedicated teacher and Eleanor's closest friend. New teachers joined the staff, women who shared their vision of education that empowered rather than limited. Miles fulfilled his dream of owning land. 5 years after their wedding, they purchased 20 acres adjacent to the school. Miles started raising horses, a business he could manage while still being present for the school and their family. The additional income helped them expand the scholarship program, allowing them to accept more students regardless of financial means. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Miles and Eleanor stood together outside the school, watching the sun set over the desert. Thomas, now 9, was inside helping his sister with her letters. The sound of girls studying drifted through the open windows. "You remember the day we met?" Miles asked, his arm around Eleanor's waist. "I remember being surprised that you did not laugh," Eleanor said. "I had braced myself for more mockery, and instead you offered to help." "I saw something worth building," Miles said. "I still do, every single day." Eleanor leaned into her husband's embrace. "We built it together, all of this. The school, our family, our life. I could not have done it without you." "We needed each other," Miles said. "Your dream gave us direction. My support helped make it real, but we did it together." They stood in comfortable silence, watching the sky fade from orange to purple. Inside, someone laughed, the bright sound of a young woman discovering her own potential. The school graduated its 50th student the following year. Eleanor organized a celebration, inviting all the former students to return and share their stories. They came from across Arizona territory and beyond. Teachers, business owners, a journalist, a doctor who had gone east for medical school, a lawyer who had fought to be allowed to practice despite being a woman. Each woman stood and spoke about how the school had changed her life. They thanked Eleanor and Miles, Margaret and the other teachers. They spoke of discovering they were capable of more than they had imagined. They spoke of choices and opportunities that would not have existed otherwise. Lucy Patterson, now married with 2 daughters of her own, spoke last. "When I first came here, my mother and I were desperate. We had nothing. Miss Anderson, Mrs. Quentin as she is now, gave me more than an education. She gave me a future. She taught me that my dreams mattered, that I was capable of achieving them. I now have a successful career. My daughters will have opportunities I never imagined. That is her gift to us all." Eleanor wept openly, overcome with emotion. Miles held her hand, his own eyes bright with tears. This was what they had built. Not just a building or a school, but a legacy of empowered women, of choices and possibilities. As the years passed, Eleanor and Miles settled into a comfortable rhythm. The school became an institution, respected throughout the territory and beyond. Thomas showed interest in law and eventually left for university in California. Sarah, more scientifically minded, attended a women's college in the East, studying medicine. Eleanor and Miles's hair began to gray. Their hands, which had built so much together, became wrinkled and spotted with age. But their love never dimmed. If anything, it grew stronger, deepened by decades of partnership and shared purpose. Margaret retired at 65, though she remained close to the school, mentoring new teachers. A new generation of educators took up the work, many of them graduates of the school themselves. The cycle continued, each generation of empowered women helping to empower the next. On a warm evening in 1910, Eleanor and Miles sat on the porch of the small house they had built on their property. They were in their early 50s now, still active but feeling the years. The school building, expanded and improved over the decades, stood nearby, lit from within by electric lights, a modern marvel that would have seemed impossible back in 1882. Did you ever imagine it would become this? Eleanor asked, gesturing to the school. "I imagined you would do something remarkable," Miles said. "The details did not matter. I just knew that supporting you, helping you build your dreams, was the best decision I ever made." "Marrying you was mine," Eleanor said. She reached for his hand, and he took it, their fingers intertwining with the ease of long practice. They sat together as the desert night fell, stars emerging one by one in the vast sky above. Inside the school, young women studied and dreamed and planned their futures. Thomas was now a lawyer in San Francisco, married with a daughter. Sarah was completing her medical training in Boston. Everything Eleanor had dreamed of that day in the dusty warehouse had come true. The school she had imagined existed, thrived even. But the greatest gift had not been the school itself. It had been finding a partner who saw her dreams not as obstacles, but as essential parts of who she was. Miles had not just helped her build a school. He had helped her build a life full of love, purpose, and meaning. "I love you," Eleanor said, squeezing his hand. "I love you too," Miles replied. "Always have, always will." And there, on that porch in Camp Verde, Arizona, under a canopy of stars, 2 people who had built something extraordinary together simply enjoyed the evening, content in the knowledge that their love and their dreams had become one and the same, creating ripples of change that would extend far beyond their own lives. The school continued for decades more. Sarah eventually returned to Arizona, opening a medical practice and teaching health classes at the school. Thomas visited regularly, using his legal expertise to help the school navigate complex regulations as Arizona moved toward statehood. Both credited their parents' partnership, and the school's existence with shaping who they became. Eleanor and Miles lived well into their 70s, surrounded by the legacy they had built together. When Eleanor passed away in 1925, the school held a memorial service attended by hundreds of former students, teachers, and community members. Miles spoke at the service, his voice wavering but strong. "My wife once said that I helped her build her dreams. But the truth is, she taught me what dreams were worth building. She showed me that real love means supporting the other person in becoming their fullest self. Our years together were the greatest gift of my life." Miles lived 3 more years, passing peacefully in his sleep at the house he and Eleanor had shared for so long. He was buried beside his wife, their headstones simple but meaningful. Eleanor's read, "She dreamed and then she built." Miles's read, "He believed and he helped build." The Anderson School for Girls continued operating until the 1970s, when changing times and educational systems led to its integration into the public school system. But the building remained, converted into a community center and museum dedicated to Eleanor's vision and the generations of women who had been empowered there. In the museum, visitors could see Eleanor's original plans, sketched carefully on paper now yellowed with age. They could see photographs of Miles and the other men who had helped build the physical structure. They could read testimonials from former students whose lives had been changed. They could understand that one woman's dream, supported by one man's unwavering belief, had changed hundreds of lives and influenced countless more. The story of Eleanor and Miles became legend in Camp Verde and throughout Arizona. Not a tale of perfection, but a true story of partnership, of love that empowered rather than constrained, of dreams pursued despite opposition, of building something that mattered. Theirs was a love story not of grand gestures but of daily choices to support, encourage, and build together. Young couples visiting the museum would stand before the photographs of Eleanor and Miles, seeing 2 people whose love had been expressed through collaboration and mutual respect. They would see that real romance was not about one person completing the other, but about 2 complete individuals choosing to build something together that neither could have built alone. And sometimes, in the evening light filtering through the museum windows, visitors swore they could feel the presence of those 2 remarkable people, still together, still building, their love echoing through the decades as proof that when you find someone who not only accepts your dreams but helps you build them, you have found something truly extraordinary. The last board member of the original school, a student named Alice who had attended in 1895, gave an interview on her 100th birthday in 1978. She remembered Eleanor and Miles vividly. "Mrs. Quentin taught us that we were capable of anything we set our minds to," Alice said, her voice still strong at a century old. "But Mr. Quentin taught us what to look for in a partner, if we chose to have one. He showed us that the right person builds you up rather than holding you back. He believed in his wife so completely that we all learned to believe in ourselves. Together, they created something that outlasted their own lives. That is true love. That is true legacy." And indeed it was. Years after their deaths, decades after the school's official closing, the impact of Eleanor's dreams and Miles's support continued. Former students had become teachers, doctors, lawyers, business owners, politicians. They had raised daughters and granddaughters with the knowledge that their dreams mattered, that they were capable, that the right partner would support rather than suppress their ambitions. The ripples spread outward, touching lives that never knew Eleanor and Miles directly but benefited from the change they had initiated. In living rooms and classrooms, offices and hospitals, their legacy persisted. A woman standing up for herself in a business meeting. A girl deciding to pursue engineering because she knew she was capable. A man supporting his wife's career ambitions because he understood that love meant empowerment. All of it traced back, in some small way, to a dusty warehouse in Camp Verde in 1882, and two people who decided to build something together. This was the true measure of their love story, not just the happiness they found together, though that was real and profound. Not just the school they built, though that was remarkable, but the fundamental change they created in how people understood partnership, support, and the nature of love itself. They proved that dreams did not have to be sacrificed for love, that the right partner made dreams more achievable rather than less. Eleanor Anderson and Miles Quentin lived and died, as all people do. But what they built together, both the physical school and the intangible legacy of empowerment and partnership, continued long after they were gone. In that continuation, in those ripples spreading ever outward, they achieved a kind of immortality. Their story was told to children and grandchildren, included in local history books, studied by historians interested in women's education and the development of the American West. Each retelling might change small details, but the heart of the story remained the same. She had dreams and they laughed at her. But he believed in her, and together they built something extraordinary. That was the story. That was the legacy. That was the love that changed the world, one dreaming girl at a time.